Welcome, everyone, to another edition of The Travel Show with your host, Ted Blank of Ted Blank Luxury Travel and Adventure. I'm very excited to chat it up with Ted because I have a feeling I might know what we're going to talk about today. How have you been?
I've been doing well. I've been doing well. Thank you.
You've been on a long vacation.
Well, I think we actually have now the record of show prep for one episode that we've done.
Sure. And I got to tell you, I had to come and do show prep with you because it was too long of a time to be without my Ted Blank.
There you go.
So let's talk about the fact that you and I actually had a little rendezvous in Duluth.
At sea.
And yes. Duluth hosted a beautiful cruise ship, which was a big deal for them.
It was, yeah. So I was on a cruise on the Great Lakes on Lake Michigan and Lake Superior with my parents on a cruise line called Victory Cruise Lines on a little ship called the Victory II. We were coming through the ship canal early in the morning, and I heard an unmistakable voice and an unmistakable laugh, and I looked out and I said, oh my God, there's Mo. And sure enough, you were in Duluth. Just when I thought it was safe to go back in the water again.
Guess again.
We had a chance to host you on board the ship, and you got a chance to look at the ship and
up close,
meet the crew and look around a little bit.
That was really cool. And I have to say that from everything I heard, different people in Duluth, the fact that there was a cruise ship in Duluth was a really big deal. So is this something new?
It's newer, and it's becoming increasingly common. There are actually 4 different cruise lines that operate on the Great Lakes pretty much all year. Most of the time, the ships start their cruises either in Chicago or Milwaukee, and they go over to Toronto in Canada. So they go up to like Mackinac Island, they go down through Detroit, Cleveland, Niagara Falls, and then they end in Toronto. Mm-hmm. But periodically, the ships venture up into Lake Superior. And so this particular ship goes there twice each year. And we were on the first cruise, and there's one more coming up a little later this year. And some of the other ships do that as well. The Great Lakes are still a relatively niche area, but they're starting to increase, and Lake Superior is kind of the last of the area. But there's so much there. I mean, it's amazing.
That's what you said. So this cruise in particular started for you where?
This was a round-trip cruise from Chicago.
Okay.
So we actually got on board the ship at Navy Pier.
Oh, how
which is pretty
fun.
Cool. Yeah, pretty cool. Most of the cruises on the Great Lakes, they do something that I think is a really good idea. They start with a night in a hotel in the origin port before you get on board the ship. And so that lets everybody get there the day before. You don't have to worry about racing to catch the ship or missing the ship. And then that first day, you get up in the morning, you have breakfast. And we had the opportunity to take the little architectural cruise on a little tour boat up the Chicago River. And that was kind of the start. And then after that was over, they took us to the ship and we joined the regular ship for the rest of the cruise, which was 2 weeks long and ended back in Chicago. Okay. Now, not every cruise does a round trip. Like I said, many of them will start in Chicago and end in Detroit. But this particular one did. Some of the ships started or end in Milwaukee as well.
So when you said that everybody gets on this cruise ship or they all stayed at the same hotel, you don't have to do any thinking on this, do you? Or you don't have to really plan anything yourself?
You just have to show up at the hotel.
That's so
we take care of, all the details, get you to the hotel, and then the cruise line has a desk there, and from then on, they're kind of in charge. View your luggage tags and tell you the bellman will be up, between 9 and 10 o'clock to get your suitcases, and off you go, and from that moment on, you're kind of within the warm embrace of the cruise line.
And you actually had some tour buses that rode alongside or something?
Yeah, so some of the cruise lines do that, some of the other ones don't do that, but this particular cruise line charters some motor coaches for the entire cruise season, so from May through October. And the motor coaches drive from port to port, and when you get off the ship every day, it's the same motor coach and the same driver waiting to take you off on your excursions. The shore excursions are included in the price of the cruise. You'll have a choice of excursions in some ports, and in some ports they have a little extra add-on excursions that you can do as well. One of the places we stopped was Green Bay, and so give you one guess as to what the add-on excursion was in Green Bay.
Of course, something having to do with the Packers.
It was the VIP tour of Lambeau Field.
Wow.
So you got to do the behind-the-scenes tour and go through the players' entrance out onto the field and have lunch in the players' dining room. And so if you're a Packer fan, and there were a lot of Packer fans on the cruise, even from all over the country, you got to do that. And in Duluth, the included excursion was a trip up to the tower there, the Engler Tower. We drove along Skyline Drive, and then we went to Glen Sheen Mansion and had a tour of the mansion. But if you wanted to do the optional excursion, you would go up to Split Rock Lighthouse and Gooseberry Falls. Yeah, so lots of options. And I think we also visited Houghton, Michigan, up on the Keweenaw Peninsula, which we used to be the center of copper mining.
Didn't know
So
that.
just a fascinating history there. It's also where the first professional ice hockey game was ever played in the United States. So there's a memorial to the first ice hockey game. I don't think it ever gets above 50 degrees in Houghton. We were there in June and the tulips were still blooming.
Oh, boy.
So it was kind of like a trip back to spring.
Well, let's talk about the trip itself. So you left Chicago.
Yep.
And then where did you go?
So we headed north to Mackinac Island.
Okay.
And it took us a whole day to get there.
It did.
So we had a
Okay.
day at sea or a day on the lake. And, these are small ships. They're kind of like river cruise ships almost. But there's a lot to do on board. One of the neat things is that this particular cruise line has someone they call the Lake Lorian who travels with you. And he or she is an expert in the Great Lakes, and they give talks about different topics on those sea days. So we learned about shipwrecks. We talked about the Edmund Fitzgerald. We learned about the environment, and fish and the lamprey eels and the pollution in the Great Lakes. We learned about the early explorers and the native people who were there. We learned about the current kind of trade and commerce on the Great Lakes. We learned about the history of passenger shipping on the Great Lakes. And I think if you were to ask, people of maybe your parents' generation, there used to be a lot of passenger ships on the Great Lakes that were kind of the only way of getting from place to place. And eventually, as the highways became more popular, they kind of fell by the wayside. And so it's nice to see that the Great Lakes are now coming back as a cruise destination. So a lot to do on board. The food is excellent. I really have to give a shout out to the crew on board. The service was excellent. The food was excellent. And just a beautiful ship. So you have a kind of a day to relax and enjoy. And then we got to Mackinac Island, which really cool place. Kind of hard to get to. If you wanted to get there, it's a long drive and you have to take a little ferry to get there. And this particular ship is small enough that it can dock right in the downtown of the island.
Wow.
So you literally get off, walk across the street, and we got on some carriages and went for a carriage tour of the island. I mean, how cool is that? That was really neat. And it was such a beautiful day, and all the shrubs were just starting to bloom. This was probably June 4th or June 5th, and the forsythia were still blooming. So really beautiful. We got to walk through the Grand Hotel, which is absolutely amazing. The architecture and the interior decor there is really kind of out of this world.
Been used in a lot of movies.
It's been used in a lot of movies. Yeah, I didn't realize this, but it actually has a sister resort that's in West Virginia called the Greenbrier Resort. And they were designed by the same architect and the same interior designer, a lady named Dorothy Draper, who was a very famous interior designer in the 1930s. And so a very interesting design. I don't know if I would choose it for my house, like palm tree wallpaper and burgundy carpets and stuff, but pretty neat and pretty different. And just a cool day to explore this beautiful little island.
And the fact that the ship is not gigantic was nice, that you could get up close and personal.
Yeah. And then everybody got back on the ship a little early. And so we actually had time to sail south and go underneath the Mackinac Bridge during the day because we had passed through it in the middle of the night before that. So we actually had time to sail down, go under it, turn around, go back, and then we headed up to go through the Soo Locks from Lake Michigan into Lake Superior.
So what is that like? Those locks have to be gigantic.
They are gigantic. And on the way up, we went through them in the middle of the night. On the way back, we went through them in the morning.
Okay.
And so we went into one lock, and in the other lock was one of those big 1,000-foot long oar boats.
Boy.
And holy cow, I don't know how they can get those in there. There is not a lot of room on either side to maneuver around there. They're just big. They're just big. And to watch them, and they're so silent. And to watch them just kind of keep going up and up and up and keep getting bigger was pretty neat. And then they have like the Lock and Dam here. They have one of those little overlook platforms.
Yeah.
So of course there are all sorts of people there, and we're waving. We're kind of like the celebrities of the of the seas, and it was really, really neat. So that was a cool experience.
So help me. The locks in between those two bodies of water, is one higher than the other? Is that why they have to have it? Or?
Yep. So if the locks weren't there, there's a river called the St. Mary's River that runs between the two, and it would be some very high rapids. I think they said it was 22 feet is the difference in elevation.
That's a lot.
So similar in principle to how the Lock and Dam works here or in Red Wing, but just a lot bigger and very busy.
Do all of the Great Lakes have a lock in between them?
This is the only one until you get to the Welland Canal, because the Welland Canal connects Lake Ontario with the St. Lawrence River, and it goes around Niagara Falls, which is a lot bigger than 22 feet.
Right.
So that's the other Lock and Dam.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
And that lock there, the St. Lawrence Seaway and the Welland Canal, is what restricts the size of ships that can get in and out of the lakes. So those big 1,000-foot freighters actually can't leave the lakes. They're stuck. They can only stay on the lower lakes. They can't leave and ever go to the ocean.
Didn't know that. I guess I thought they went to the ocean.
Nope. I think 750 feet is the maximum length. So when we were in Thunder Bay, the harbor was full of saltwater ocean-going vessels waiting to load grain. And they will take it through the Welland Canal, through the St. Lawrence River, and overseas to Africa, to Europe, wherever people buy Canadian and American grain.
Okay.
They export from Duluth.
Wow.
As well. See, I learned all these things from the Lake Lurian.
Yeah,
He
no
did a good
kidding.
job. Yeah.
Oh.
We didn't have pop quizzes, which was
No, that's nice.
good.
Wow, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So, and I like how you went through some at night and some during the day so that you had two different perspectives.
Yeah, and we had a chance to go through. There's a canal that connects the city of Houghton. It kind of cuts right through the heart of the Keweenaw Peninsula. So we went through that during the day. That was really neat. Really got very narrow at some points. And it was neat to go through that on a ship. If you went to Isle Royale on the ferry, it would also take you through that.
Is that where the wolves are?
That's where the wolves are.
Okay.
Yeah. We didn't stop at Isle Royale, but we did stop in the city of Munising, Michigan, where the Pictured Rocks National Seashore is located. And the Pictured Rocks are limestone cliffs
Oh, yes, that
have been exposed to
Yes.
the Great Lakes. But there's so many minerals up there, iron and copper and other things, that they kind of leach through, and they give these cliffs all sorts of different colors. So greens and oranges and yellows and blues, and it's really impressive to see up close. So that was kind of another little highlight. So, a lot of different things on this trip that we got to see and experience.
Things that you didn't even know.
I asked people about the Pictured Rocks, and most people have never heard of it. And it's amazing. It's absolutely beautiful, breathtaking.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what are some of the other cities?
We went to Marquette, Michigan.
Okay.
We had a chance to go into a mine, an underground mine.
What
there.
do they mine there?
They mine taconite ore.
Oh,
It's
yep.
the last mine. This one is closed, but there's still a mine there where they mine taconite.
Still, okay.
Still. Yep. They still mine copper in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We went to Duluth. We went to Thunder Bay, Ontario, Sault Ste. Marie. We went to Green Bay, Wisconsin, actually spent the night there. And then we went to Muskegon, Michigan, which is on the west coast of Michigan, kind of almost directly across from Milwaukee. And that was our last stop. And then back to Chicago.
And was this a good pace?
Yeah, it was a very nice pace. It was pretty relaxed. You could fill your days in port with excursions if you wanted to. You could take a morning excursion and then, just go for a little stroll in the afternoon and go shopping or, have a cup of coffee. In most cases, we docked right downtown, in Duluth. We were
By
a
Canal
5-minute
Park,
walk from
yeah.
Canal Park, right behind the convention center. So you could fill it with as much as you wanted to, or take it easy. And it was, it was an older crowd on there, I would say. Everybody was American from the Midwest. Actually, there were some other folks there from Wisconsin, folks from California, Florida, who'd never even really heard of Duluth, Minnesota. And they just really wanted to, see something in North America. And it's a short flight to get to Chicago. Easy in, easy out. And, just a very relaxed way of seeing a really cool part of the country, and from a very different perspective.
For sure.
I've been to Duluth. I spent a summer in Duluth, and as Mark Twain, I think, once said, the coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in Duluth, and I can relate to that. But I got to see things I never thought I'd see, and to sail through the canal and
For sure.
have the bridge honk at you, that's kind of a cool thing to do.
So what was your favorite city you visited?
That's hard to say. I'd never been to Muskegon, Michigan before. That was very interesting.
It was.
I learned a little bit of trivia there. The company that makes the bowling alley pin machines, Brunswick. If you ever go to a bowling alley,
Okay.
it's Brunswick. They're based in Muskegon.
Okay.
And so they
Very
do
niche
Yeah,
there.
they do
Yeah.
research and development on bowling alleys in Muskegon, Michigan. Now there's an
Wow.
interesting job for
No
you.
kidding.
We also had a chance to go on a retired World War II landing ship that was used in the D-Day invasion. And it was used to land troops and tanks on the beaches
Is
in
that the
Normandy.
kind that opens up
Opens
in the
up in the front.
Oh,
And
geez.
really oddly enough, it ended up getting purchased after World War II by a company that was a contractor for the Nash Automobile Company, Nash's have been
Wow,
gone for a long
no
time.
kidding.
And they carried new Nash cars in the hold of this, almost like a ferry. They
Right.
carried them to ports across the Great Lakes to distribute them. And so it survived. Most of the other ones were scrapped, and it is now a museum. And very interesting to see. They actually have the original flag that was over the ship during the D-Day landings.
Wow.
And they had, interviews on tape with folks who were on board the ship at D-Day and other places. So really, really interesting museum that we had a chance to see.
You would
as well.
never have thought of going to
Never
that.
would have thought
Right.
to go see that. And they also had a little museum in downtown Muskegon where they had an exhibit about the Brunswick Bowling Company, a pickle company. They manufacture pickles in Muskegon. So, kind of quirky stuff. In Green Bay, there's a museum called the Neville Public Museum. Part of it is a history of Green Bay. So it starts with a mastodon. And they start the history of Green Bay and the Ice Age. And they go up through the present.
Wow.
It has a Lego replica of Lambeau Field, and it has a collection of original Dr. Seuss artwork that someone in Green Bay collected and donated to the museum.
Wow.
So just interesting stuff, and different than Europe. We're not going there to see cathedrals
Right.
or castles,
Right.
Although there was actually some interesting churches there, and certainly there were a lot of missionaries in this area as well, back, in the 1700s and 1800s. So there's some interesting stories about that as well. But very much like a river cruise in terms of kind of the size of the ship and the feeling on board, but just with an American twist to it.
Well, and that certainly is a cruise that you can recommend to a lot of people.
Yeah.
If they're looking for something very
Something
unusual.
close to home. Yeah, something
Yeah.
close to home. And there are coastal cruises all over the United States. These aren't the only ones. You can pretty much go anywhere up and down the eastern seaboard. You can go on the Mississippi River. You can go on the Columbia and Snake Rivers. You can go, in the Ohio River. You can go up to Chattanooga, Tennessee and see some of the Civil War battlefields. I mean, there just is a whole lot here in the United States. And I think people maybe wouldn't think that a cruise is the way to do it, but it was a great experience and, great for folks who maybe don't walk as well as they used to. This worked out really well for them, but you could also go kayaking on this cruise if you wanted to. So kind of something for everyone.
Well, how can people learn more and maybe pick a coastal cruise that's right for them?
Yeah, you can give me a call at 651-964-8245, or you can visit my website, tedblanktravel.com, or pop into our office at 206 Locust Street in downtown Hudson. We're open Monday through Thursday from 10 to 2 for walk-ins, or give us a call to schedule an appointment, and we're happy to talk with you all about cruising on the Great Lakes or anywhere else in the world.
Love that. Ted Blank, he is the host of The Travel Show. Ted Blank is with Ted Blank Luxury Travel and Adventure.